Island of the Blue Dolphins, Chapter 8. The wind blew strong as we climbed the trail, covering the mesa with sand that sifted around our legs and shut out the sky. Notice here that you can see the water, and then when they get up on this mesa, and in Spanish, mesa is a table, it's flat, just like a table. So they climbed the trail covering the mesa with sand that sifted around our legs and shut out the sky. Since it was not possible to find our way back, we took shelter among some rocks. We stayed there until night fell. Then the wind lessened, and the moon came out, and by its light we reached the village. The huts looked like ghosts in the cold light. As we neared them, I heard a strange sound like that of running feet. I thought that it was the sound made by the wind, but when we came closer, I saw dozens of wild dogs scurrying around through the huts. They ran from us, snarling as they went. The pack must have slunk into the village soon after we left, for it had gorged itself upon the abalone that we had not taken. Gorging yourself is eating entirely too much, eating everything. Look at this man in the picture. Looks like he's in pain. He has gorged himself. It had gone everywhere searching out food, and Ramo and I had to look hard to find enough for our supper. While we ate beside a small fire, I could hear the dogs on the hill not far away, and through the light their howls came to me on the wind. But when the sun rose, I went out of the hut. The pack trotted off toward its lair, which was at the north side of the island, in a large cave. This would be an example of a lair, something that's naturally created by rocks or mountain or dirt, and it looks like a cave that you can actually go into. That day we spent gathering food. The wind blew and the waves crashed against the shore so that we could not go out onto the rocks. I gathered gull eggs on the cliff, and Ramos speared a string of small fish in one of the tide pools. He brought them home, walking proudly with the string over his back. He felt that in this way he had made up for the trouble he had caused. With the seeds I had gathered in the ravine, we had a plentiful meal, although I had to cook it on a flat rock. My bowls were at the bottom of the sea. The wild dogs came again that night, drawn by the scent of fish. They sat on the hill barking and growling at each other. I could see the light from the fire shining in their eyes. At dawn, they left. The ocean was calm on this day, and we were able to hunt abalone among the rocks. From seaweed we wove a rough basket, which we filled before the sun was overhead. On the way home, carrying the abalone between us, Ramo and I stopped on the cliff. The air was clear, and we could look far out to sea in the direction the ship had gone. "Will it come back today?" Ramo asked. "It may," I answered him, though I did not think so. "More likely it will come after many suns, for the country where it is gone is far off." Ramo looked up at me. His black eyes shone. "I do not care if the ship never comes," he said. "Why do you say this?" I asked him. Ramo thought, making a hole in the earth with the point of his spear. "Why?" I asked again. "Because I like it here with you," he said. "It is more fun than when the others were here. Tomorrow I am going to where the canoes are hidden and bring one back to Coral Cove. We will use it to fish in and go looking around the island. They are too heavy for you to put onto the water. You will see." Ramo threw out his chest. Around his neck was a string of elephant teeth, which someone had left behind. It was much too large for him, and the teeth were broken, but they rattled as he thrust the spear down between us. "You forgot that I am the son of Chowig," he said. "I do not forget," I answered, "but you are a small son. Some day you will be tall and strong, and then you will be able to handle a big canoe." "I am the son of Chowig," he said again. And as he spoke, his eyes suddenly grew large. "I am his son, and since he is dead, I have taken his place. I am now chief of Galisat. All my wishes must be obeyed. But first you must become a man, as is the custom. Therefore, I will have to whip you with a switch of nettles and then tie you to a red ant hill." Ramo grew pale. He had seen the rites of manhood given in our tribe and remembered them. Quickly I said, "Since there are no men to give the rites, perhaps you will not have to undergo the nettles and the ants, Chief Ramo." "I do not know if this name suits me," he said, smiling. He tossed his spear at a passing gull. "I will think of something better." I watched him stride off to get the spear, a little boy with thin arms and legs like sticks, wearing a big string of elephant teeth. Now that he had become chief of Galasat, I would have even more trouble with him, but I wanted to run after him and take him in my arms. "I have thought of a name," he said when he came back. "What is it?" I asked solemnly. "I am Chief Tanyositlopai." "That is a very long name and hard to say." "You will soon learn," Chief Tanyositlopai said. I had no thought of letting Chief Tanyositlopai go alone to the place where the canoes were hidden. But the next morning when I awoke, I found that Ramo was not in the hut. He was not outside either, and I knew that he had gotten up in the dark and left by himself. I was frightened. I thought of all that might befall him. He had climbed down the kelp rope once before, but he would have trouble pushing even the smallest of the canoes off the rocks. And if he did get one afloat without hurting himself, would he be able to paddle around the sand spit where the tides ran fast? If anybody's been to Morro Bay in California, this is a sand spit. It's an area in the middle where there's sand and the water kind of goes around it. That's what Karana is worried about, the different tides. Thinking of these dangers, I started off to overtake him. I had not gone far along the trail before I began to wonder if I should not let him go to the cliffs by himself. There was no way of telling when the ship would come back for us. Until it did, we were alone upon the island. Ramo therefore would have to become a man sooner than if we were not alone, since I would need his help in many ways. Suddenly I turned around and took the trail toward Coral Cove. If Ramo could put the canoe in the water and get through the tides that raced around the sand spit, he would reach the harbor when the sun was tall in the sky. I would be waiting on the beach, for what was the fun of a voyage if no one were there to greet him? I put Ramo out of my mind as I searched the rocks for mussels. I thought of the food we would need to gather and how best to protect it from the wild dogs when we were not in the village. I thought also of the ship. I tried to remember what Mara Saip had said to me. For the first time I began to wonder if the ship would ever return. I wondered about this as I pried the shells off the rocks, and I would stop and look fearfully at the empty sea that stretched away farther than my eyes could reach. The sun moved higher. There was no sign of Ramo. I began to feel uneasy. The basket was filled and I carried it up to the mesa. From here, I looked down on the harbor and farther along the coast to the sand spit that thrust out like a fishhook into the ocean. I could see the small waves sliding up the sand and beyond them, a curving line of foam where the currents raced. I waited on the mesa until the sun was overhead. Then I hurried back to the village, hoping that Ramo might have come back while I was gone. The hut was empty. Quickly I dug a hole for the shellfish, rolled a heavy stone over the opening to protect it from the wild dogs, and started off toward the south part of the island. 2 trails led there, one on each side of a long sand dune. Ramo was not on the trail I was traveling, and thinking that he might be coming back out of sight along the other one, I called to him as I ran. I heard no answer, but I did hear far off the barking of dogs. The barking grew louder as I came closer to the cliff. It would die away, and after a short silence start up again. The sound came from the opposite side of the dunes, and leaving the trail I climbed upward through the sand to its top. A short distance beyond the dune near the cliff, I saw the pack of wild dogs. There were many of them, and they were moving around in a circle. In the middle of the circle was Ramo. He was lying on his back and had a deep wound in his throat. He lay very still. When I picked him up, I knew that he was dead. There were other wounds on his body from the teeth of the wild dogs. He had been dead a long time, and from his footsteps on the earth, I could see that he never reached the cliff. 2 dogs lay on the ground not far from him, and on the side of one of them was his broken spear. I carried Ramo back to the village, reaching it when the sun was far down. The dogs followed me all the way, but when I had laid him down in the hut and came out with the club in my hand, they trotted off to a low hill. A big gray dog with long curling hair and yellow eyes was their leader, and he went last. It was growing dark, but I followed them up the hill. Slowly they retreated in front of me, not making a sound. I followed them across 2 hills and a small valley to a 3rd hill, whose face was a ledge of rock. At one end of the ledge was a cave. One by one, the dogs went in. The mouth of the cave was too wide and too high to fill with rocks. I gathered brush and made a fire, thinking that I would push it back into the cave. Through the night, I would feed it and push it farther and farther back, but there was not enough brush for this. When the moon rose, I left the cave and went off through the valley and over the 3 hills to my home. All night I sat there with the body of my brother and did not sleep. I vowed that some day I would go back and kill the wild dogs in the cave. I would kill all of them. I thought of how I would do it, but mostly I thought of Ramo, my brother.